historically, the human race has always wanted to go faster.
Go for Excel to Mach 1.1.
Got to go for Excel, Kestrel Gate.
There we are. XB1 is supersonic, faster than the speed of sound.
Congratulations, Torpedo. You made history today.
Congratulations to the whole team. Super thankful for you guys.
The future of supersonic travel is looking incredibly promising. It's not just about speed, it's about making the world more connected.
It's great to be here. I mean, if that didn't get you fucking fired up to start the day, then you shouldn't be here. Every time I see that, I get goosebumps. I'm so fired up. I'm going to be talking with Gurley later, but I was really looking forward to be on the stage with Blake and talking about Boom and what it means for the startup ecosystem. We have great hard tech startups here in LA, so thanks to Mark and the team for having us. But Blake, you started on this journey a decade ago, and you just accomplished that. And I've known you throughout this journey, the grinding, the disbelief. What does it feel like 10 years later to know that you not only achieved supersonic flight, but you're on the precipice of bringing supersonic flight back to the rest of us?
It feels pretty freaking good. There are a lot of days. I think Boom has probably had a near-death experience at least once a year for a decade. And what got us to breaking the sound barrier, to doing it boomless, was a whole lot of not giving up. And a thing I've come to believe is that every entrepreneur should just work on the biggest, most important thing they can get their head around, because then they're going to get through the near-death experiences. They're going to not give up. And and where we are today, it is absolutely not guaranteed that Boom will succeed.
Yeah.
There's a lot of challenges ahead, but I do think we've gotten far enough that a renaissance in supersonic flight is inevitable.
Yes.
And if we don't do it, somebody else will. Of course, I want us to do it.
Yes. Does anybody know what year was supersonic first achieved? Somebody yell it out. 1947. Chuck Yeager, 40 years after the first flight, we achieved supersonic. And here we are in 2025, and Blake, it feels like the car went in reverse rather than went forward. Why did we achieve such an incredible feat in 1947, and then, we're still struggling to get back to supersonic flight?
The future generally gets better, but it's not automatically better. Somebody has to make it better.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of threads here. One thread is about the birth, the death, and the rebirth of entrepreneurship in aerospace. There was a golden period from 1903 to 1921 when all the great aerospace companies that we think of today were created. Boeing, Douglas, Lockheed, all created in that tiny time period. And then what happened? Well, in the 1960s, all the founders retired. And the introduction of the first jetliner coincides exactly with the retirement of the last founder. That was de Havilland. He made the first jetliner. It wasn't the first successful jetliner, but it was the first jetliner. And then we shifted innovation models. And we shifted away from commercially driven innovation to national prestige-driven innovation. So people forget Concorde wasn't a startup. It was a joint venture between the French and British governments.
Yes.
Right? Usually joint ventures from French and British governments is a war.
Yes.
Not an airplane.
Yes.
It's remarkable it worked at all. There was a Soviet competitor. There was an American competitor that got canceled, and nobody thought about economics. Everyone was trying to show everybody else up. And so Concorde was a 100-seat airplane, $20,000 ticket. By the way, the seats are uncomfortable. It's DOA economically.
Yes.
And then the world learns the wrong lesson The world learns that supersonic flight is impractical. Nobody tries. We ban supersonic flight over land, which is, we'll talk about it later, but it's so dumb.
Yes.
So dumb. And then so the founders retire. Then the people who work with the founders retire. And then the accountants take over.
Yes.
And people criticize Boeing for overly focusing on money, and I don't think that's right. I think it was the short-term focus on money that is like what really hurt Boeing.
Interesting.
Like operating a business, an aerospace business, really any business, but especially an aerospace business, to the next quarter.
Yes.
Is like flying an airplane while looking only straight down.
Yes.
Like it goes okay for a little while, but pretty soon, like it's not good.
So we have a couple slides. You started at Groupon. You went from arbing all of us, our ad clicks on Groupon. For some reason, you said, that's not how I want to spend my life.
Yeah.
And you made the decision to start Boom. I want you to tell us, about the 10-year funding journey, what you thought it was going to be like, what it ended up being like, and then kind of where we are today along kind of the time, really the nitty-gritty of what does it take to get to this moment?
Yeah, so to start a little bit with my story, so I was a software engineer by training. My first job out of school was at Amazon, where I was something like Engineer 200, and I was lucky to get to work on stuff that Jeff cared about. Yeah. And after that, I was part of a couple different startups, one that I founded, and I'd been at a mobile company, I'd been at Amazon, so I figured I should work on mobile e-commerce, because that's what my resume said I should do. And so my first startup, we were making a barcode scanning game.
Yes.
And people think that some startups are easier than others. And I think the difficulty level is actually set by the founder. And because no matter what I do, I'm going to be at my red line. But some things are more motivating than others. And I would like working on the barcode stupid thing.
Right.
Like I would get up in the morning and think like, why did I ever start this? And like, I'm going to screw it up and I'm going to lose everyone's money. And I just want out and like, why am I doing this?
Hold on a second. How many founders are in the audience? Okay, how many founders in the audience have felt that feeling? Yeah, you're not alone.
Right. And so we had a chance to acqui-hire it to Groupon.
Yes.
And that was my escape fantasy.
Right.
Everybody got their money back in a little bit, like it was fine. And then I got to go one rung up from barcode scanning game to internet coupon. And it just left me like, I want to do something where being at my red line is worth it.
Yes.
What year had you started at Amazon?
2001.
Okay, and now what year is it after you sell the business to Groupon?
It's 2012.
Okay, so the decade had gone past, and you're in. I mean, the internet was pretty damn exciting during that decade, but you're saying to yourself, what's the really big thing I'm going to do with my life?
Right. And so in my 20s, I had set a lifetime goal of flying supersonic. I'd gone to the Seattle Museum of Flight and seen Concorde. And I'm like, why is the most amazing airplane ever made in a museum, not in the sky? Like, you can put it in a museum when there's something better up there.
Yeah.
It had gone by prematurely. And so I put a Google alert on supersonic jet, and I wanted to be like first to know when I could buy a ticket.
Yeah.
And so after having like vested at Groupon and kind of just fired myself, I'm like, I want to do another startup, and I wanted to work on something where no matter how hard it was, I wouldn't regret trying. And so I prioritized my own personal happiness.
Yes.
Because I want to make the red line worth it. So anything with an airplane in it went to the top of the list, and I thought I would get 2 weeks into the research on supersonic and like understand why it was a terrible idea and get it out of my system. But instead, what I found is like I think there are things all over the world that are big unsolved problems that are hiding in plain sight that nobody's working on.
Right.
And it's a bystander effect thing. Supersonic flight would obviously be great. Nobody's doing it. There must be a good reason.
Right.
So nobody looks.
Right.
And it turns out like the basic insight that unlocks all of this took me 2 weeks, and it was a 3-line spreadsheet. How much better do we need to do versus Concorde, 1960s technology, to make a supersonic seat match the economics of a flying bed in business class? Turns out it's like a single-digit percentage improvement. It's not much versus 1960s technology. And so like once I saw that, I'm like, okay, I need to get deeper. put myself to school in aerospace engineering, read every textbook I could find. I took remedial calculus and physics from Khan Academy because I didn't remember how an integral worked.
Yes.
And a thing I've come to believe is really important. I had a spreadsheet model of the airplane and a spreadsheet model of the market, and they had to match up. And it basically said, with only technology that already exists and only regulations that already exist, we can fly supersonic, and we can do it for a business class kind of fare. So I figured at that point, either I have no courage or I'm going to see how far we can get.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary, that moment. And I think there are a lot of people who see those problems in the world, but they maybe are just older and wiser than you were at the time you started this, right? Like I hear, from our friend Elon, he's like, had I known then 22 years ago or 23 years ago what I know now, I probably wouldn't have taken it on because I didn't know the struggles that I was going to go through. If you think about your worst struggles over the last decade in starting this, had you known those at the start, do you think you would have still started?
Yes.
Okay.
Right, and I think that's the power of picking something that I really, really wanted to exist.
Yeah.
I mean, we had some awful struggles. Like, we did a thing nobody does. We said, hey, we did a down round, we did a recap last year. That sucked.
Yes.
There are a number of times where, we almost ran out of money. We got down to 7 days of cash at one point.
Right.
And the worst struggles are the ones that are all about, like, who I am and, like, my leadership and, like, am I the person to do this or am I screwing it up?
Right.
Like, those are the darkest moments, but it was all worth it.
Right. Right.
And I mean, in all candor, because I think it's important for entrepreneurs to hear, Blake and I have talked about Altimeter investing in Boom like many, many times over the last decade. And the reality is, as an investor, when I think about my fiduciary duties, my portfolio exposure, knowing what I thought the length of this journey would be, there were so many uncertainties in terms of the cost of capital that would be required. And so I always looked at this as an investor and said, I want to invest in Boom, but I want these things to be de-risked, right? And so I think one of the hard things was finding what investors were willing to take that hard science risk. It's one of the challenges. Elon has said many times he was on the verge of bankruptcy, many times at Tesla, many times at SpaceX. He was bailed out at the last second in 2008, by some folks in Silicon Valley. Do you think something needs to change about the funding ecosystem? Do we just need more examples of success to unlock the dollars to invest in the next batch of hard things?
Well, it's the future needs friends.
Yeah.
And
Not France, friends.
friends.
Yeah.
Maybe it needs France too. I don't know.
Yeah. For summer vacation.
Make France great? I don't know. It's very so. A thing I didn't understand when I started Boom is that investors are money managers.
Yes.
I thought investors were people with money.
Yeah.
And I just needed to convince them it was a good return. But people talked about Facebook back in the day, like if the product is free, you're the product.
Yes.
Well, if the product pays you,
Yeah.
you're definitely the product.
Yeah.
And so, I think it took me a long time to understand is VCs are managing money on behalf of their customers.
Yes.
And they have to do what their customers want. And there's a very much a need to go raise the next fund.
Yes.
And the way you raise the next fund is the last fund has to look good.
Yes.
And a supersonic jet startup sounds really stupid. Like nobody's made any money in aviation for a long time. It's famously bad.
Exactly.
Right? So how do we get someone to have enough conviction to look their LPs in the eyes
Yes.
and say, this is a contrarian bet, but I want to take it? That's very difficult to get somebody to do.
Yes.
And so we found, basically we skipped a lot of VCs and we just went straight to LPs and LPs put money in.
Yes.
And that, we tried everything and that's the thing that worked.
Yeah.
But I think my hope is, we haven't succeeded yet, but when we do, it will create something that people can pattern match off of.
I wonder, this is a really important thing for people to understand. Defense tech was uninvestable a decade ago.
Right.
And then there was Anduril. And now every single venture capital firm is running to find the next defense tech startup, right? Saronic, you name it. And now they're getting these great valuations because there's pattern recognition.
Right.
And when you start something, if you're starting the next social network, you say, I'm going to be better than Facebook because, right? And, you don't have to convince me of the business model because the business model exists. Here you had to invent the business model against a backdrop where there were a lot of failures, We had failures investing in the space before. And so my view is that first, there's a general unlock that's occurring in the world around hard tech and hard problems, right? Because of Elon, because of SpaceX and Tesla and Andurils of the world, and because of the booms of the world. So now I want to get back to the product a little bit. You know, not only did you achieve supersonic with Geppetto's, you know, first supersonic flight, right, since the retirement of Concorde, but you also did something that had not been done before, which was you did boomless supersonic. So the name of the company is Boom. Maybe it should be boomless. But explain to us what boomless supersonic is and how you achieve supersonic flight without a boom.
Yeah, so boomless flight means that there's no audible sonic boom on the ground. And the way it works is the boom comes off the airplane at a certain angle. You got to control that angle. And it makes a U-turn in the sky, and it basically goes up to space before it ever hits the ground. And the physics of this are called Mach cutoff. It's been around for a long time. Like, this is not new physics. We didn't invent the physics. It doesn't have anything to do with the wing of the airplane or the shape of the airplane. It has to do with controlling the angle at which the boom comes off the airplane, that's about speed. The shock wave that comes off the airplane is a function of speed. And then you got to break the sound barrier high enough that curving of the boom that happens in the atmosphere can be steep enough that it never hits the ground. You've probably all seen that like middle school science experiment where you got a glass of water and you drop a pencil in the water and it looks broken.
Yes.
Well, the reason it looks broken is because light refracts when it goes through something with a different speed of light. And you can kind of think of it like, imagine you're driving your car and your right wheels are going faster than your left wheels, you're going to turn.
Yes.
So anything that's a wave turns like that when there's a difference in speed along the wavefront.
Yeah.
And so sound is the same thing. And the speed of sound isn't the same everywhere. It's a function of temperature. The colder the temperature, the lower the speed of sound. And so guess what? It's colder up high, it's warmer
Yes.
down low. So you're going to curve towards low speed.
Interesting.
So if you fly high enough and at the right speed, nobody ever hears any boom.
Yes.
And so to do this, you need a few things. You need to know what the weather is in near real time.
Yeah.
You need a computer to calculate the right speed and altitude, and then you need engines that can do it. And they can do it right. You know, this works up to about Mach 1.3. And Mach 1 to Mach 1.3, it's a difficult regime to fly and it's high drag. And so the engines and the aerodynamics have to support efficiently flying in that speed regime. Concorde theoretically could do this,
right.
but they had to be at Mach 1.3. They were in afterburners, which is it's like cutting a hole in your fuel tank.
Right.
So they had no range. So
Right.
it wasn't practical. And they also didn't have the computers and they didn't have the weather data.
Right.
But we've got all those things.
Right.
Right. Okay, so what everybody really wants to know about is how does this change our lives, right? So talk to us a little bit about this map and where we're headed next, right, with Overture. So this is 2029, commercial supersonic, 65 seats, far more spacious than Concorde, at a price point that's competitive with lie flat first class, that can get us across the country or from New York to London in 3.5 hours. Talk to us about the challenges that we now face. What's the viability? What's the probability of success getting from XB1 to Overture?
Yeah, so I think our biggest risk from here out is that we don't get done for an obtainable amount of capital.
Yes.
Like, it's not the market. Obviously, passengers want faster flights. United, American have made deposits on airplanes. People want these airplanes.
Yes.
So just in perspective, United has reserved how many Overtures?
They have a deposit on 15 and a pre-order of another 35.
Okay, so a deposit on 15, pre-order 35. American?
20 plus 40.
20 plus 40. Just to put in perspective, boomless across the country, you're going at about 1.5 times current speeds. If you do it across the ocean where a boom is acceptable, 2 times current speeds.
Right.
Okay, so a lot of orders for this plane.
We've got the first 5 years of production in the order book. We just have to make it. And with all the technologies there.
Okay, so walk us through what happens in 25, 26, 27, 28 in order to get to this in 29.
It's a scale up and it's a lot of detailed engineering.
Yeah.
So this year we're building our full scale engine. Next year we're starting to build the first airplane. 27 we roll it out. 28 it's in the air. Then we test it. 29 we carry passengers.
Show of hands, how many would pay the same amount that you would pay for a lie flat first class seat to fly Overture? Sexy.
Yeah. I mean, our market research says 97% of passengers want supersonic. I think 3% click the wrong button.
I mean,
other arm is tired.
Here's the crazy thing, and it moves us into this question about why American innovation stalled and why we may be again in this accelerationist moment, right? You're not inventing supersonic flight. Chuck Yeager, 47. I mean, only 40 years after, down in North Carolina, doing this with literally rubber bands and cloth wings, you got supersonic, but now it's been another 50 plus years just to get back to supersonic. One of the reasons, this was 2016, I'm a pilot, I named my firm Altimeter, I like planes, and I was so excited for the prospect of getting back to supersonic, but when I started looking into it, I found these deranged regulations, right, that were preventing supersonic. And I said, well, why are we not allowing supersonic flight? And, it would be things like cattle stampedes and all this other bullshit that clearly some people with regulatory capture and vested interest did in order to prevent supersonic flight.
That's exactly right. I mean, the ban on supersonic flight over land happened only after the American competitor to Concorde was canceled.
Say that one more time.
The supersonic flight ban over land in the US happened only after the American competitor to Concorde is canceled.
Yes.
This was to protect Boeing.
Yes. I mean, Bill Gurley gave this famous talk. It's pinned to his Twitter. I'm going to be talking with him later today. The amount of innovation in this country that's been stifled by the regulatory capture coming from the biggest incumbents in this country, right, is shocking, right? It was Boeing that pushed for supersonic flight bans, and the other manufacturers in the U.S., right? And we got to call that out. This is big tech versus little tech sort of thing.
I think people talk about business ethics and they got it all backwards.
Right.
Like, we need real business ethics. And real business ethics is things like don't play unfair, no regulatory capture.
Right. Right. So
so here's an example. Some people say, hey, Boom, you go push to get the supersonic flight over land banned. By the way, our business model doesn't actually need that. We can start out international.
Right.
If we go do that, it's going to invite competition. Maybe we shouldn't do it. And I think that's unethical.
Right. Well, it's not only unethical, it's really bad for the country.
It's terrible for the country.
Because China is going to do this. And, you and I have had the conversation. In fact, we've had the conversation with Elon. And so 4 days after XP-1 flies supersonic, I see a tweet by you with President Trump, who has what appears to be Air Force One in the form of a supersonic jet in his hand. How did you go, it took you 10 years to get supersonic, but only 4 days to get the president fired up about supersonic?
Well, no lobbyists were harmed in creation of that picture. It was a surreal week for me. It was like Monday we broke the sound barrier, we announced boomless cruise. I got an airplane on the pink eye to DC, so painful, to go start to lobby. By the time I landed, we had an invitation to come to the White House. And so it was like 24 hours from Mach 1 to the West Wing. That was Tuesday. Wednesday was on the Hill. We got broad bipartisan support to kill what everybody agrees is a terrible regulation. By the end of day Thursday, what a cabinet member had brought the airplane to POTUS, and it was in the Oval Office.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of talk now about Air Force One and how screwed up it is.
Yes.
I think it's a national embarrassment. Xi Jinping has the latest model 747.
Yes.
And POTUS has 2 generations old 747.
Yes.
Let Xi have his 747. We should have something better.
Yes. Well, I thought it was interesting. You tweeted this. I first said get rid of the ban in 2016. I shared that with you the other day. You had somehow missed that when I first posted. What was interesting is Shervin said at the time, he replied to my tweet in 2016 and said United ought to buy Boom, which I thought was funny. And then you posted this. Elon almost immediately responded. Maybe we can wrap here, in the last minute, just talking about, as an investor and entrepreneur, the national imperative at this moment in time with what's going on in terms of the pace of innovation, to have pro-growth agenda, pro-innovation agenda in Washington. How do you feel as a founder and entrepreneur today versus how you felt over the last 10 years in terms of the support you have to bring innovation forward?
I mean, I feel completely unlocked.
Yeah.
Like, like we were pushing this ball uphill, and now, it feels like the world wants it to go. And, we canceling.
Yes.
I feel like I can speak my mind more freely than a year ago. And there's, excitement about repealing dumb regulations. It's boom time.
Yes. Well, I, for one, have told Blake, I'm extraordinarily grateful for you. I'm grateful for you not giving up. I'm grateful for this journey. It will be really important for America to win the race to supersonic, not just the race to Mars. So thank you for doing what you're doing. Give a round of applause to Blake and to Boom.
Thank you.
Thank you, Blake.